Hello, welcome to my webinar today. It's Amanda Chadwick here, a senior speaker at Peninsula Business Services Limited. We thought we'd trial an afternoon webinar just to see what the uptake was like and to see if it's more popular than the 11 o'clock webinar. So I'd really appreciate your feedback at the end of this to tell me if you prefer afternoon webinars to morning webinars and you find it more accessible. Today's webinar is it's the 20th of March and it's on how to manage mental health issues within the workplace and sickness. Now, if you caught my presentation on Monday, I did a presentation on addictions within the workplace, and it's amazing how that actually falls into the mental health category. So I might touch on that if I get the chance in a moment. So these are the facts regarding sickness. Can't eliminate. It's always going to be there. Let's not beat around the bush with sickness. It's going to be there, but it's finding out really why somebody's off and the truth of the matter. We're going to talk about the policies and procedures later on that you should have in place really to protect your business so that you can prove that you did everything possible to support somebody. People are absent from work on average 6.5 days per year. The sickness costs the economy 17 billion per annum, so that's why the government are putting such pressures on employers now to control their own sickness in the workplace, making it impossible to claim back SSP come April. So there's a huge focus on sickness, and the government has objectives this year to combat and put the pressure on the employer to manage it within the workplace themselves. And I have to be honest with you anyway, early intervention is absolutely crucial to manage sickness. So I'm going to talk about my top tips in a moment, which I think that you should do when you're talking about sickness and also and absenteeism and mental health issues. Okay, 1 in 8 days is not genuine sickness. That doesn't surprise me. Some employees consider sick days a perk. 2.7 million more sick days had by smokers, 131 million lost work days. Common ailments, coughs, colds, flu for short durations, but actually we've got the greatest number of days lost were for muscular skeletal reasons. So this is bad back, etc. So what I'm going to touch on here, that was just to give you some of the facts here. What I'm going to talk about in a moment is mental health and how you manage that in the workplace. I'll try and put as much information as I can into 45 minutes, but really this is a topic that if I really went into incredible detail and spoke on disciplinary procedures, grievance procedures, equality, disability, mental health, addiction, capability, I really could actually speak maybe for 2 or 3 days on the whole subject and the working time regulations as well, because this all really comes as a bundle. So I'm just going to give you an overview today and pile as much information as I can that you can take away and use. So reasons for absence: not bothered, not loyal, no commitment, worried training, a new product can cause stress. This could be somebody working, the example I'll give you is a doctor's surgery. 3 ladies worked there for a long time, and what happens is they all 3 of them go off with stress at the same time. When I was involved with the company, I asked them, was there anything that happened new within the company that would cause them to go off with stress? It turns out a new computer system was being installed, and when we spoke to the ladies, because they'd said it was stress, we intervened urgently and early. They admitted that it was actually a computer system that was scaring them. They thought they weren't capable of using it. And when I spoke to them, I reassured them and said, really, when you've worked in a doctor's surgery and managed clients for 10-15 years, I think the total service amongst them was 45 years, that they shouldn't be stressed. They have lots of skills, and just because of their age doesn't mean to say that they're not going to be able to work as well as somebody that was younger than them. So we reassured them, got them back into work. We had 3 people back in work with stress. Now, falling under mental health issues, stress and depression does fall under mental health issues. We'll talk about that later on. So, bullying and harassment policy, somebody can go off with mental health problems, depression, stress again. Have you got a policy in place? Have you got a capability policy? And we'll talk about those later on. It could be children. Oh my gosh, not children, I don't think. For me, my most stressful time wasn't children, wasn't babies, wasn't nursery, paying the nursery bill. It was teenagers. Oh my goodness me. My eldest daughter, teenager, when she hit teenage years, absolute nightmare for me. I think that was my most stressful life. I'm absolutely dreading the other 3 children becoming teenagers. years, but that was my most stressful time. So it's about knowing your staff. If somebody is particularly dedicated to you, is never normally off, and then showing signs of stress, depression, or other mental health issues, isn't it worth speaking to your staff? And when you've heard my webinars before, you've heard me speak to people, and if you've ever been to one of my face-to-face events, I really push the fact that a lot of things can be solved by speaking to people at the earliest stages, you know, but we're also always looking for defence for the employer as well. So we've got debt, relationship issues, disability, short-term illness, pregnancy. These are all reasons for absence. Other work can exhaust somebody. They could be having, you know, doing exams, could be on courses, or they could be working voluntary or have another job because they are in debt. And as a result, it affects you and your workplace and somebody going off with stress and depression again or another mental health problem. But also what you may find is that it's useful to have a term and condition there to find out if somebody's working elsewhere. So we'll look at that again in a moment. And then other personal issues. It doesn't have to be debt or relationship issues. They could be a carer for somebody that can have an impact on their health. So those are just some of the reasons for absences within businesses. And on our advice line, literally, sickness is always one of the hot 2 or 3 topics that people ask us about, along with how to hold the disciplinary. So let's have a look at the mental health background. People are really embarrassed to mention that they might have a mental health problem, and I think that at least one of us throughout our life, you know, you will at one time, sorry, not at least one of us, I meant to say we will at one time in our life experience something similar, or if not, a mental health issue. And that might be after a sudden impact in your life, like moving house, for example. It could be somebody dies close to you. It could be that an animal dies that you're attached to. It could be that you're having relationship issues. Something can have an impact. And an ordinary person that would never ever show signs before, something happens out of the ordinary, it has an impact on them and they have a mental health issue. So it's not something that people do feel comfortable talking about. The mental state is the mental state in which we feel we are able to cope with the normal stresses of everyday life. And this is different for different people. I have to, in my family, it's like Coronation Street. There's always something going on in my house. I've got 4 children. I've got 2 grandchildren. I've got another grandchild on the way. My grandson is blinded by, in one eye, blinded by an accident. My granddaughter had problems with her hips and was an older hay. My daughter, was a teenage mum, and she's still with a partner. She's been with him since she was 12 and they live together happily. But the problem we've got is that it isn't a dull moment, honestly, but some people can cope with everyday stresses. I can cope with my job, tribunals, problems my clients have, helping people every day in a high pressurized job, but give my life to somebody else and it just might tip them over the edge. And I've got friends that have a really, I don't know if you've got friends like this. You go into the house and there isn't a speck of dust anywhere. They have 3 children, but you can't even tell they've cooked tea. Their clothes are always ironed and they look brand new. You've got problems where, where you look at them and you think, gosh, I wish I was like that. They're so calm. And then you get other friends that they don't have an issue at all. Everything's so organized that if they got a red bill, they would absolutely stress out about it. So it's different people manage different things within their life, the mental state in which we feel able to cope. So there isn't a line we draw and say this is when you become stressed. It's different people react to it. But know as well, positive mental health is rarely an absolute state, and mental health conditions can emerge suddenly or gradually over a period of time. Persistent mental health can be classed as a disability. So we've got me going to the shops, yes, shopping with the children. I get stressed, that's stress, yeah, but it's just instant, and then it goes away again. This isn't a disability. But then we get somebody who's continually stressed, that is always stressed all the time and now has to take medication, has to have counselling, has to speak to the doctor, can't cope with everyday situations. Persistent mental health can cause a disability. Addiction can cause a disability as well. So mental health and background, what we've got here, this is what is and what is not a mental health condition. That learning difficulties are not a mental health condition. Dyslexia, Asperger's syndrome, ME, chronic fatigue, autism and epilepsy. And, it's all about this medical questionnaire, finding out who you take it, who you've actually given the job to. You can't ask about somebody's mental health before you offer them the job, and it's only in extreme circumstances that we could actually talk to somebody about their medical condition before we offer them the job, and that's extreme circumstances. For every employee listening to me now, you shouldn't be asking somebody about their mental health or illnesses or disabilities until you've actually offered them the job with the job offer letter. But, you know, to protect yourself, you should be sending a health questionnaire out with the job offer letter. But let's have a look at some of this. You know, some of these really on the right-hand side, although they're not mental health conditions, they concern me if somebody is, for example, working in a kitchen and they've got severe epilepsy and they're there to pick up pans of boiling hot water. We as an employer would need to know about that illness. That's why we need to make sure that if we took somebody on that was suffering from severe epilepsy and they hadn't told us and they did have an accident, that we've got defence in place. So what we're going to look at is making sure that we use the health questionnaire when we offer them the job, and then we've got our first defence document. And if somebody says, look, I have got one of these illnesses, I have got a disability, then we can do a risk assessment and base our risk assessment on the evidence that they've given us. So on the right, those aren't health conditions. Then the two that might surprise you are stress and depression, that do fall in to the category of a mental health problem if it's long term. And this is when somebody's having counselling. It might be that they've been signed off with stress and depression, but really when they are taking a medication such as Prozac or something similar, they are covered then under the Mental Health Act. Bipolar disorder, and this is, you might be familiar with people with this, it was called manic depression years ago, and bipolar is where somebody could be manically happy and then have downward spirals and then have stages in their life when they can be completely normal, but then it hits them again when something triggers it off, and it's an ongoing illness that they might have for a long time. Schizophrenia, psychosis, and these are ones where really, you know, they have medical attention. So what does the mental health impact have? Well, we've got popular misconceptions that they're unusual. Actually, they're not. They're not unusual to have a mental health problem. The more we realise this, you know, human beings are complex individuals. We've got a computer in our skull. We have emotions. We judge people by the emotions on their faces, by the impact of life, and things can affect us. So it isn't unusual for somebody to have a mental health problem, and it shouldn't be. There should not be a stigma attached to it. So 1 in 4 of us will suffer a mental health problem in our lives at some point, and it doesn't. Some people say it doesn't affect the bottom line. Well, you're wrong. Actually, it does affect the bottom line. Mental health problems cost over 30 billion in a year. So we really do have to say that we need to manage this in the workplace. We need to know what to do, but also we need to make sure that we're prepared and we educate our managers as well. But that's not all. There's 91 million days lost per annum to mental health problems. Nearly half of all long-term sickness, illnesses and absences turn to mental health, or they say that they're mental health, and they're caused by mental health problems. And then we've got this other issue that we're dealing with, and this is where presenteeism, I think I pronounced that right. Different people pronounce it differently. But this is where you have somebody in work working for you, but they're actually not doing the job they should be doing, or they're making mistakes, or there's a near accident because of them. And this is where somebody needs the money. So they come into work because they need the money, but really they could do with the time off. So mental health issues and presenteeism cost the 15.1 billion per annum, and this can cause accidents and also mistakes within the workplace. Symptoms, well, symptoms that we should be looking for, you know, are things like it could be somebody who is in work and they're given tasks to do, and the tasks that they're doing, they're not performing well, not within the time scales, they're making mistakes, they're not focused, they're confused, they might be irate, they might be showing signs of anger, they might be showing signs of bullying people, they're not rational. This is signs of presenteeism, somebody being in work that might be suffering from a mental health problem. So why aren't we comfortable talking about mental health? Why do we find it an uncomfortable subject to talk about? I wouldn't judge anybody who's suffering with a mental health problem. I've got a friend who's a high performing individual that works within an intensive care department as a senior nurse within that department and carer, and she's always been a high performing individual, and then she gave birth to a boy. And what happened is she'd never had a mental health problem before, but as soon as she gave birth to her son, she suffered such severe postnatal depression that she couldn't function and that she had to have electric shock treatment. When she had electric shock treatment, and after, say, a year, she eventually came out of the postnatal depression and she recovered. And she's never had an episode before that, or she's never had an episode again. In fact, she never had another child after that, because it left her feeling so sad about the situation and so affected that she never had another child. But she's still now a high-performing individual, but she had an episode. She had an episode that took a year out of her life and had a massive impact on her family. And you would never have thought that when you looked at her. I've worked with people that the pressure of the job has got too much, and they've gone off with stress, depression. It's taken them a couple of years to get over it. It can be a family issue that's affected somebody, and I've also seen people deal with the death of a family member differently to other members of people that I've worked with, people that come back into work after a couple of days, and yet other people that really don't get over the death of a family member. It takes them months. I know a particular colleague, not within Peninsula, but a friend of mine, who again is a high-performing individual, who had a sister committed suicide, and that was 8 years ago, and she still has episodes every year where it affects her around about the time that her sister killed herself, because she left 2 children behind, and it affects her again. And yet, you know, if you met her in everyday life, apart from the 2 weeks that she's really poorly within a year, when there's a reminder of what happened, you would never know that she suffers from depression and stress, and it's really affected her and her family. So we shouldn't be uncomfortable talking about mental health at work. We should be able to manage it. We should be able to focus on who has a mental health problem, to spot the signs, and to be able to offer assistance and help to those people. If you do have a mental health problem, sometimes if somebody approaches you, or you have a mental health problem, you see it as a criticism. You see it as a fault. You see that the managers might see somebody as weak or unreliable. And the more we advertise the fact that it's not uncomfortable to talk about, it isn't a stigma, that we do accept lots of people will have mental health issues at one point in their life, the more and more people will embrace the fact to support people and get them back to work at the earliest stage. So, and offer them the right assistance and help with the particular problem they're suffering. So weak and unreliable, 2 in 10 felt a mental health issue was due to lack of willpower. That's ridiculous. And because it's not visible, you know, you haven't got a physical disability, so people don't believe that you might not be ill. It's therefore disturbing. And a hangover with the British stiff upper lip attitude that we have as well. So 43% of the people that were asked said they would feel very uncomfortable talking about mental health to their manager. So let's have a look at it. Why are managers uncomfortable talking about mental health at work? Well, they might feel they're partly responsible for that person's mental health by putting too much pressure on them. You know, you get somebody who starts within a company, and they work really hard, they're dedicated, they become the PA, then they do the Christmas parties, then they do the HR, then they do the health and safety, and they seem to do everything within that company. But what happens is they become stressed with the workload, and then something else happens at home and it tips them over the edge. So some managers can feel partly responsible for the person's health and well-being. They also might not have the confidence or knowledge to deal with the issue, and don't want to give the wrong advice, or end up with a bigger issue because they've handled it incorrectly. And you know the managers I'm talking about, some managers really don't have the kid glove skills to deal with a mental health issue or approach somebody. I know my mother would say, "You want tablets?" You know, and that's really direct, isn't it? Rather than saying, "Is there anything I can help you with? You don't seem yourself just lately." If she was, I wouldn't give her a job as a manager, let's put it that way. The way she would ask things would be very direct. So you've got to be very comfortable. You've got to have the confidence and knowledge to deal with a mental health issue. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to want to support people. So principles are very similar to dealing with a physical issue like long-term sick or a musculoskeletal injury. So don't be afraid. So these are the factors that we can control within the workplace if we know about a mental health issue. The workload, for example. So how would we control that? Well, if we know somebody's off sick and they're saying it's stress, if we've got an employee assistance program, we can alert them straight away that we've got an employee that's saying it's stress related, and we can get early intervention and get them right advice with the employee's consent straight away, immediately. So early intervention, letting it. So if it's a stress issue, a depressed issue caused by debt, we can get them debt help, We can get them advice lines, and lots of people dealing with debt, they hide the letters, they don't manage it, and it gets out of hand, rather than saying, look, I've got a problem, I've got a money problem, I've got a debt problem, I need help, can you help me? And then seeking advice, they're too ashamed to do it, and it can cause stress and depression and have a knock-on effect. They need the money for the job, yet they're going to lose the job if they don't perform, yet they don't tell you that they've got stress and depression caused by debt. They just say they're ill. So looking at the workload, if somebody alerts you, so the working time regulations come in here, getting them in touch with an advice line, an employee assistance program, doing return to work interviews anyway with any absence from day one is absolutely imperative. It could be that they're in a monotonous job as well. The health and safety have standards with this. They don't expect somebody to have a monotonous job, and if it does, they want you to vary the task because it has an impact on somebody's mental health. So work variety again. Work relationships. So I'm looking for an equality policy, equal opportunities policy, and a bullying policy here. And in there, race, religion, religious belief, no belief, environmental belief, political opinion, affiliation, marital status, disability, gender reassignment, and age, and educating people on bullying. What is bullying, and what, and how their relationships, how they interact with their working relationships. And remembering that, times have changed. People's perception of what is acceptable in work from when they first started work, say for example in the 70s, is totally different to now. What is acceptable then, it might have isn't acceptable now. For goodness sake, smoking in the workplace, that changed a few years ago. But smoking was acceptable in the 70s, 80s, 90s and the 2000s. And it's only changed recently in the last few years, the smoking ban. Yet, when you think about smoking in the workplace, I think it's absolutely barbaric that we ever did it. Yet, speak to me in 1982, I'd say, well, it's not a problem, because that's the way I was educated. It's the same with somebody's perception of what a working relationship is and what they can say at work. So it's your duty as the employer, as the manager, as HR, to educate your staff, to say what is acceptable in a working relationship. What is acceptable with work variety? What is acceptable with the workload, and what is excessive? And that the working time regulations should be taken into consideration here, because it is in the top 3 of the biggest complaints in tribunal. People complaining about the workload, the impact it has on their health, the impact it has on their hours they're away from work, and also the mobile phones and internet, and the use of sending emails at 11 o'clock at night and not expecting your staff to answer them. Let's have this work-life balance. So, and also the factors you can control as well are the involvement you have with your staff, the culture of disclosure, and making people familiar with and educating them with mental health issues, of addiction issues, with bullying issues, and putting posters up. But don't leave the posters up for 12 months, because we simply ignore posters. You put them on the back of a toilet door. I go to the, without being personal, maybe go to the toilet 3 times a day. I don't know. I don't know if I do. I haven't said I do, but I'm just saying maybe somebody does. And in the workplace 3 times a day, 5 days a week. Listen, after a week, 2 weeks, they're just going to ignore that poster on the back of the door. So change it or put it somewhere else above the dryer, to educate people, to say we have an employee assistance program. We handle mental health issues. We have a mental health awareness day. We have a bullying and harassment day. We have a working time regulations highlight day, to let people know what is and what isn't acceptable. And this, for me, as the employer, is all evidence. If somebody says I didn't help them, I didn't support them, this is evidence of saying, actually, do you know what? During the week of March, we run a mental health awareness day. In the contract we do this, we support you, we offer this, why didn't you come to us with it? So, and then communications as well, and then bullying can have an impact on somebody's mental health. So and some people, what you've got to remember, don't realise that they're actually bullying their staff, and you have vicarious liability. If you're HR listening to me, it's always the director that comes to you and say, why didn't you handle this? So we've got to educate staff. The overlapping factors you can try to influence are money, status, friendship, sense of purpose, stress, coping strategies, lifestyle choices. But the factors you can't have an impact on are their childhood experiences, something they've experienced as a child that's going to have an impact on them later on. Their family relationships. Addiction problems, though. Now, if you do feel like you want to listen to my addiction webinar that I hosted on Monday, it is available on YouTube, and I'll give you the link later on. But addiction, if somebody's addicted, now let's just focus a little bit on addiction here. We're not just talking about alcohol here. we're not just talking about drugs. Let me give you some examples of what addiction problems can have an impact on mental health. We've got not just drugs, illegal drugs. And that, by the way, just a reminder here, as an employer, the Health and Safety have a great piece on their website about drug abuse in the workplace and how managers and employers, if you know somebody's dealing or taking drugs within work, you can get in trouble yourself. So just take that seriously. We're not just talking about illegal drugs, we're also talking about prescription drugs as well. The most common ones here, cocodamol, for example. People could be addicted to laxatives, which you can quite easily get over the workplace, over a Boots counter, for example. And paracetamol, where somebody becomes addicted to it but has a paradox effect where it has an impact on their health by making them actually in more pain because they're taking too much paracetamol. So again, what you get from addiction is you may get a mental health problem because the addiction might cause them to be depressed or stressed. They might have counselling because of it. So this could fall into the mental health category. Can you interact with this? Well, and can you support your employee? Well, I think you can, because if it becomes aware that somebody has an addiction, then you can offer support, the employee assistance program, but you can actually, if somebody has an addiction and they have a mental health problem because of an addiction, then you should be doing reasonable adjustments because they fall into the disability category. And again, as I said, drugs, illegal drug prescriptions, we've also got alcohol, and then we've got this other thing, high function alcoholics who are very successful individuals. Remember the jokes that people used to make about doctors, you know, pressurized drug, that doctor I see always stinks of alcohol. That's what I used to hear years ago. High functioning individual. We're seeing this in other industries now where the job is so pressurized and they are successful. They think it's their ultimate right to have a drink, but they become a high functioning alcoholic. What we also have then is we have addiction to the internet, Facebook, technology, mobile phones. And I don't know if you know, but have you ever seen somebody who works for you, they get a text and their personality changes, or they see something on Facebook that changes the conversation they're having with you, they become aggressive. Or even porn is accessible on your mobile phone, you know. So we give children mobile phones, they can easily access porn, they can easily access things, they can become addicted to certain things. I'm not saying your child's going to become addicted to porn. What I'm saying is that there's lots of things now that we can access that we never used to be able to access. I know when I was younger, and they get exposed to it earlier, and in some cases it can cause an addiction. So for us in the workplace, what we're experiencing in our advice line is really different types of addiction now: technology, mobile phone addiction, Facebook, technology, and drugs and alcohol, etc. So this can also cause somebody to steal in the workplace. It can cause somebody to have an impact on their mental health problems. So, you know, there's certain things that do overlap that might not be on that slide. So again, what can you as a manager or an organisation influence? I've just gone through that. So what resources are available? Well, internally, spot the signs, be a detective. But remember, you know, that not all the signs might lead to a mental health problem. So return to work interviews. I always say to anybody I speak to, my face-to-face events, my webinars, you should be doing return to work interview from day one. That's to speak to the odd dayers, to stop them having the odd day sick, to manage that, because you can't claim SSP back as of the 6th of April, and the responsibility is on you. So return to work interviews take you a couple of minutes. Somebody might at that point say, I've got a mental health issue, I'm suffering from depression and stress. They might not know stress and depression is a mental health issue if they're taking tablets, but you do now because I've educated you. If there's signs of lateness, irritability, poor concentration, bad-tempered, tearful, the way they're losing weight or putting on weight. By the way, I'm giving you an overview here. I don't want you to target somebody that's just recently been on a diet, take them in a corner and say you've got a mental health issue. You know, seriously, I'm giving you an overview here, please. You know, there's lots of different signs that you can look out for, but it's also educating your managers to know what the signs are. I don't know your staff. I'm giving you an overview. You know your staff. You don't have to be a detective to know when something's wrong with a member of staff. And if you've got a huge workforce, that is why it's important to educate your managers, because they're the ones that deal with their staff every single day. Okay? Bad-tempered and tearful. That's another sign. And engage with the problem with posters, policies and procedures as well. And keep a watching brief. Keep a watch, brief your staff, educate your managers and brief people to say we've got an open culture and promote that awareness as well. And just say we don't frown upon mental health issues. We support it. You can still work with a mental health issue. And also as well, it's making sure that you have, if you are having experience of a problem, that there is help available. You're letting them know there is help and that you're aware of how to handle it. You can point them in the right direction. And educate people. So externally though, if there is somebody who is off sick for long term with depression, stress or another mental health issue, it's getting the employee assistance programme involved, giving them face-to-face counselling. I think they get 8 sessions with counselling, and it's taken away from the workplace then. It's in with a professional that knows what they're talking about. It might be occupational health as well, but also GPs. There's focus on them on the fit note to say what the person's suffering from, but they don't really put much information in there. Referral scheme is coming into play through the government, but that's not going to be set up yet. That's a few months down the line. And how long is the wait for that anyway? Let's think about that. So when does short-term absenteeism become long-term? Well, we usually say between a 6 to 8 week time scale. And it's all about reasonableness. It's all about consistency. And it's all about shift to medical capability as well. Remember as well, somebody can work with you. They can have a mental health problem, not tell you about it. They could be having counselling, they could be taking medication, and they've not even told you. So you as the employer in HR, you really should have something in place that says that you need to have the full facts. And that means in the employment law handbook, what you should say is if you suffer from a mental health problem, a disability, you're taking medication or your medication changes, or you have a disability, or you are pregnant, that you have to let us know at the earliest stage possible, written, so we can make the, we can implement our full health and safety standards for you. And what you're doing is delegating responsibility to your staff member to say, let me know. Get their signatures, say they've signed for the employment law handbook. And then if I work for you and I'm working for you and I'm not performing very well, I haven't told you that I'm having counselling, I haven't told you that I'm on Prozac, but when you dismiss me on the grounds of capability, I then come back and say I was taking Prozac, I'm covered under the Mental Health Act. You've got defence then to say we didn't have the full facts, you breached your contract, you didn't tell us you were having counselling, you didn't tell us you were taking tablets, you didn't tell us you were seeing somebody about a mental health issue, yet in our handbook we embrace mental health and we did say you had to tell us. You never gave us the full facts. So when we dismissed you on the grounds of capability, even during all the meetings we had with you, you never told us. When we did return to work interviews, you just said you had a cold. You never gave us the full facts. So when we dismiss you, we can only base it on the facts that we had. So this dismissal isn't disability discrimination. It's based on the evidence that you gave us. You breached your own contract. So now we come to the fit note. GPs have 8 minutes on average to assess an individual. And I work with lots of doctors' practices. We work very closely with the MDU. We also work with GP forums. And I think at least in the next month, I've got 3 face-to-face events with medical practices. So if you listen to me in your medical practice, you get together with other medical practices, I will come down and do a talk for free for you. It's not a problem. But I'm doing lots of talks in the next few months. And I don't know if you know, or your doctors actually have this up. In my doctors, there's a sign that's up in the doctor's surgery. And it's a poster. And it says, 1 ailment per appointment. What if you've got a bad neck and you've got a bad knee? Do you have to come back twice? Because they really do only have 8 minutes to talk to you. So when I speak to GPs, they say it's great, the introduction of the new Med 3 form. We think it's great that it's replaced the sick note. And it's now called the fit note. We know we're going to play an integral role in getting people back to work after long-term sick. We know that we've got to complete the note because we are the employee's doctor. We know we've got to have a discussion. We know we've got to talk to them about their illness. We've got to assess them. But now we've got to fill a blimmin' note in now to recommend to the employee what they should be doing. And they say we're not qualified to do a risk assessment. That's up to the employer. What we'll do is we'll just put some little bit of information on there saying light duties only. We haven't got time to do a risk assessment on an employee. So it is supposed to give you an idea of the work the employee does and to let you know what they should be doing when they go back to work. But actually, employer and doctors are saying we can't do a risk assessment. We'll put a little bit of information on the fit note. We haven't got really loads of time to talk about the employee's work and what they do, what it entails in great detail. So we can only put a limited amount of information on there. It's up to the employer to investigate it, and that's why it's so important to do the return to work interview, okay? So just bear that in mind. Right, so investigations and way to prevent absenteeism. You've got to have the right policies and procedures in place. You've got to have an absence reporting procedure that says, please don't text in, phone in at the earliest stage. You must have capability policies in place so it takes you down the right route of dealing with an absence, whether it's short-term or long-term, or it might be somebody's ability to perform the job that they used to be able to perform. And this is where you must have job descriptions in place. Because how can you speak to somebody about their performance if you haven't got the evidence of what they should be doing? So job descriptions, KPIs, appraisals to show this is where you were last year, what's happening. Do return to work interviews. It's great defence, especially for health and safety. Use the Bradford factor, but remember to adjust that for pregnancy and disabilities. Agree regular communication. And you might even use flowers, get well cards. And I know if I was suffering from stress and depression or an illness, and my employer said I'd like to do a home visit, I'd be so worried about what my house looked like. I'd be thinking they're going to think it's scruffy because I haven't washed the pots or hoovered, but I've not felt like it. So you might suggest, rather than a home visit, an alternative place to meet. You know, lots of people as well are intimidated by somebody coming to the home because they feel they might judge them. So I would suggest maybe, you know, we can visit you at home if it's convenient for you, but it doesn't have to be a place of work. We could actually take you to a local hotel or place that you feel more comfortable with. And then always, as well, to prevent absenteeism, introduce this employee assistance program that I talk about. And again, it's about engagement. If you've got engagement of staff, you've got dedicated staff, then you've got happy staff, you're recognising them regularly, you're going to get buy-in. So you're only going to find out if a staff member's happy or if they've got an issue at work like bullying or they feel that it's too much the workload by using KPIs and appraisals. I can't go into detail on KPIs and appraisals because, again, that's a separate topic for a separate day, but they are incredible. And I've been working and using KPIs and wrote them and have written them and incentives and motivation since the early 80s. So it is a great idea to introduce them. So are people doing just enough as per contract? And if they are, you've got to ask yourself why. These people aren't moving the earth, are they, for you? So have a look at what they're doing, have a look at the job description, and look at why they're not moving the earth for you. Look at their commitment and enjoyment, and maybe you might think about cheap ideas for awards. Changing somebody's job title really doesn't cost you anything, but a simple change can give somebody recognition and give them a new spring in their step. We've got conduct versus capability sickness policy. And also remember, it's your manager's responsibility to spot all signs of sickness, absenteeism and buy-in of their staff. Let them know and educate them. Put it in their job description that they should be doing return to work interviews. Write it into their job description. I get a lot of HR people saying to me, do you know what? I get managers that say, oh, I haven't done a job description. They're not doing, sorry, they haven't done return to work interviews and they can't be bothered. Put it in their job description as part of their targets as a manager to control their department's absence. Costs companies thousands and millions. Get it sorted. We've also got investigations as well and tracking it. And if you're a client lucky enough to use our HR Online service, you'll know that it's fantastic. There's nothing quite like it on the market. And you can track somebody's absenteeism on your iPhone. And if you want to know more about that, you know, I can and offer you some advice on it, but also a free trial on our HR Online service. It's incredible. We've also got SSP versus full pay. Well, this is going to change anyway, isn't it? But you know that you can't claim it back. But a lot of employers say to me, look, Amanda, I give full sick pay. People are exploiting it. What a benefit to have if you get giving full sick pay. I wouldn't want to work with people that take the mickey out of that. Such a benefit. I might not use it for 10 years and then have, touch wood, like it break my ankle or an accident, and then it helps me in those times when I really need it. Yet what you get is people walking into a business, seeing full sick pay and thinking, oh, I'm having a bit of that. And you know what? It spoils it for everybody, because it has an impact on business and it has an impact on growth if it's used and abused. So for me, I haven't got a problem with offering full sick pay, but you've got to manage sickness if you're offering full sick pay. You've got to take what I'm saying today seriously. You've got to do return to work interviews. You've got to interact immediately. You've got to have early intervention, definitely. Think about accruing holiday pay when people are off sick. The law's changed on that. We've also got mistakes where people look at somebody's Facebook page and they think they don't look sick, they don't look stressed and depressed. Remember what I said about disability and mental health. Look, you saw my photograph at the beginning, okay? I have a disability. You can't tell by looking at me that I've got a disability. I'm deaf. I've only got partial hearing in one ear. And yet you don't know that by looking at me. But you'd know it if you were speaking to me behind my back, because possibly I couldn't hear you. Yeah, I can hear my husband talking about me behind back, so that's interesting. I couldn't hear a car behind me, so I've got a disability. I take medication 3 times a day, but I can tell you now I've had 1 day off sick in 12 years. I don't look disabled or ill. Yes, I am. Okay, so don't judge somebody by their cover. We've got fit notes and unfit notes. Make sure if somebody's been off for long term, there's a way that you bring them back into work. Link your sickness and absenteeism to core overtime and core hours. You don't want somebody going off sick on a Friday and then doing double time on a Saturday or Sunday. So make sure you write something into your handbook there to save you a bit of money that way. KPIs used for medical capability, and treat all absences as differently. So the policies you've heard me mention throughout this webinar today, and we've only got a few more slides now, are useful documents that I would suggest to my clients and Peninsula's clients, are and also as defence documents, are health questionnaires. They are a defence document. There's no doubt about it when it comes to health and safety. Did you know that Amanda had a disability? Did you know, I haven't got severe epilepsy, but if I did you know Amanda had severe epilepsy when she crashed your company vehicle and killed 6 people? No, I didn't. And you know what? I put all the information about the job in the job advert. I did a health questionnaire on day 1, because when I offered the job, I sent it out. She's lied on it. In my handbook, I've got a statement that says, let me know if you have a medical condition or a disability. And you know what? As an employer, what more can I do? She didn't tell me. There's your defence. Okay? Be careful what questions you're asking at an interview. Oh my gosh, there was an open day over in Oldham for a care home, okay? They got local people in to this open day. This woman said, actually, I've been off recently with stress, but I'm now ready to go back into work. That's why I've come to this open day. The employer said to her, this isn't the right industry for you. I think you better leave. Be very careful what you say at an interview. Okay? There are certain questions you should stick to, and there are certain questions you should not stick to. And you shouldn't be asking people about their health, their sickness, or their family arrangements or dependents. Be careful. What you put in an advert as well, in application forms. Be very careful about that, and remember about the health questionnaire only when you've offered the job. Remember about the Bradford Care Scale and adapting it for pregnancy and disability. Always, if you're having a capability policy written or a stress policy, remember it's got to be industry specific, especially written for you. If I was writing a stress policy for a care home or a funeral parlour or a hospice, obviously this stress policy is going to be so in depth and detailed. It's going to be totally different to the one I'm writing for a sweet shop down the road. Capability policy as well. Make sure it's applicable to your business and know how to use it, because these are brilliant. It could seem like it's going to be a problem, but if you use the capability policy right and you interact at the earliest stage, you can absolutely sort an issue out at the earliest stages and not have an issue later on. When I do mediation work, I'm sat here and I'm doing mediation work. I think, you know what, if they'd intervened at the very beginning, we wouldn't have been here. And quite often I'll tell them that. You need to start talking to your staff. You, the employee, you need to start talking to your manager. Why are we here now on the verge of a tribunal when it could have been sorted out at the very beginning? Look, let's get this sorted. And it really frustrates me and irritates to get quite passionate about it. So, absence procedure and management, absenteeism, written, I've said that, core hours. Look, and what you've got to remember with stress, there may be outside influences. Of course, the UK sickness figures are attributable to stress. it can cause short spurts then long term, but you're only going to find out about this if you do return to work interviews. Remember presenteeism. They could still be working. Poor performance and mistakes, low morale. There's a knock-on effect to other people if they're working for somebody who's not doing their job properly. And then we've got managing stress. Abide by the working time directive. Okay, this is working hours, this is breaks, this is holidays. Think about other work and the implications of it. If they are working elsewhere, do you know about it? Is that why they're stressed working for you? How about a term and condition in the handbook that says, let me know you're working elsewhere, or even still, that you can't work elsewhere because you're already working for me and the job is high pressured as it is. And as a manager, you are expected to do long hours. But remember health and safety here. I was with a company yesterday, and they said what we do on an induction, I don't know why I do it because I haven't got a clue about working time regulations, but I get them to opt out straight away. Is that pressure or what? You can't force somebody to opt out of the working time regulations. Remember that. So company requirements, expectations, smartphones and email response. I use my phone as an alarm clock, yet people think it's great to send me an email at 1 in the morning. Why are you sending emails at 1 in the morning? Are you a night worker? Or you really got that much work on that you send an email at 1 o'clock in the morning? You need to look at your workload. And if you're a company and you know that's happening, you need to look at the workforce and look at your business requirements and what the company requirements are and expectations of responding to that email. Try to look at the job role and responsibility. Make sure you've got job descriptions in place. Remind employees of the healthy work-life balance. Make it fun. Laugh about it. That's what I do. I take the mickey. I say, look, seriously, you know, why would you answer the phone at 1 o'clock in the morning? And I know when one of my directors years ago, not my director now, but years ago, rang me, and I answered the phone, and it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. No, it's about 4 actually in the morning. And I answered the phone, and he went, "Hello, Amanda, is that you?" And I said, "Well, who do you think it was? You just rang me." He said, "Oh, I didn't think you'd answer the phone. I was going to leave you a voicemail message." I said, "Seriously, why are you ringing me at 4 in the morning anyway? And leaving voicemail messages. Please don't ring me again at that time." And when I saw him in work, I actually was very straight with him. I said, "You're going to become ill if you're up at 4 sending voicemail messages. You should have time during the day to do that." And he said, "Yeah, you're right there." So look at somebody's work-life balance. Are the targets attainable? Don't put targets in place that people feel pressured, because you're going to get really high-powered salespeople going off sick or not hitting the targets and going off stress and depression, and that's going to cost you more money in the long term. And remember, stress is not always work-related. It's not always a bad thing. So getting staff back into work after long-term sickness, an illness or a mental health problem, you've got to keep in touch with the employees, so agree when contact will be made and how. Remember, if you're the person causing the stress and depression, it shouldn't really be you keeping in contact with them. It should be another manager. You might want to visit them, but remember what I said about the neutral location here, and always look at the medical opinion. And if you're not happy with the notes that you're getting off the doctor, they're not in depth enough because you just keep getting sick note after sick note, you might want to get another medical opinion here. Be careful of disabilities. Be aware of disabilities. I've educated you today on just some of them. If there isn't a disability, dismissal may be an option, but make sure it follows fair procedure and that the employee is aware that their continued absence may result in their dismissal. This is all about, remember here, if there isn't a disability, this is if there isn't a mental health issue, this is if you've done everything reasonably practicable. You've gone through capability, you've gone through every route. And I know if I've got any clients listening to me today, if you want us to give you an option that isn't in the law, like you just say, look, I want to dismiss somebody. I know I'm breaking the law, but I'd like to know what would happen if I did that and what the consequences of that action would be. You can get that advice, but be aware you may not be insured for it. There are lots of different avenues you can take. There's the avenue where you sit on the fence. There's the avenue where you tick every box, you follow every procedure, and then you terminate somebody's contract, but it's taken you a long time to get there. And then there's the avenue where you might actually just think, it's costing me so much money, I need to terminate it. I know that I'm not doing the right thing by law, but I want to know what's going to cost me to get out of this situation. But remember, I'm giving you an overview today. I'm here for the employer. And if you want to tick every box. That's when we give advice, we have to tick every box to avoid a tribunal. But if you want the advice that may not be ticking every box, and it might be the answer you're looking for, and you know you're going to break the law, then ask us for that advice and ask us for the support on that. You may not be insured for that because it's not abiding by the law. But I get people saying, I'm frustrated because it's so long-winded. Sickness, disability, mental health can be long-winded. Ultimately, we want to avoid a tribunal, don't we? So that's what you've got to be aware of as well. And it's also about the employee. If you handle this incorrectly, you can have a massive impact on somebody's well-being for future years. And we don't want that to happen because that can be very, very costly. We want you to listen to us. We want you to tick all the boxes, and we want you to make sure that you end up without a tribunal and affecting somebody's mental health. And ultimately, early intervention, we can get them back into work earlier anyway with the right support and help. So remember, when you're getting staff back into work, it's risky to dismiss while an employee is still within a period of contractual sick pay. It's all about reasonableness. So the decision to dismiss somebody is about whether it is reasonable for the employee to dismiss in the circumstances. You really 100% need advice here. It's a myth that you cannot dismiss somebody when they're off sick. It clearly can happen, but must be a fair procedure. And if they've got service to bring unfair dismissal, remember that, or a disability, they don't have to have service. If you don't want to dismiss, think about what adjustments you can make to get them back into work quicker. Honest to God, there's loads of options now that you might not have considered, and we might consider those options for you. Flexible working, short time hours, term time working, night working, shared job. And this isn't necessarily reasonable adjustments. The obligation to make those only comes into play when you're dealing with a disability. But just any adjustments, like starting later and finish later, for example, can help somebody get back into work who's got a mental health problem. And really remember the fit note. And we're nearly finished now with the mental health webinar, but remember here, getting staff back into work, whether the return is with amended duties, working time or not, the employee is likely to feel disjointed because it is likely that there have been some changes in the workplace during their absence. And it might be different personnel, different premises, or even a different structure or manager. So break that person back into work gently and speak to them at the end of the day. You should take the time to reintroduce the employee to the working environment when they've had long-term sick, possibly by inviting them in for some time before they're due to start work so they can meet their new team, for example, or familiarise themselves with changes or a new route to work, or the way round maybe new premises. It's giving the employee the opportunity to see how their working day will pan out without the pressure of the normal working day, and easing them back into the work and the habit and the work ethic again. Because when you've been off for a long time and you're going back into work, it's a big impact. You know, you've got used to different things at home and suddenly you're back in work. And also, you don't want somebody being overfaced on their first day, and it might hinder the success of their return to work back. This might even be after maternity as well. Carrying out a return to work interview with the employee will give you the chance to discuss individually any other work-related changes the employee needs to know about, and also allow a two-way discussion about any further needs and requirements in relation to the return to work, in addition to discussions they had prior to their return. So remember this: phased return, flexible hours, part-time work, and look at all different options. Look at different shifts, look at different jobs, and also if it was a disability, it might be reasonable adjustments. And even if it's not a disability, you might have reasonably just something anyway, just to make them happy. But remember, if you're changing a job title, a job role, or adjusting something, you might have to make a contract change. And remember the legal implications here. And always remember to support your staff by having meetings and communicating and educating people. The Equality Act 2010 requires you consider any reasonable adjustments needed to enable the employee to do their job if their sickness absence is because of a disability. Remember, mental health is a disability. Useful tool I've spoken about throughout the webinar today is the Employee Assistance Programme, and research shows that early proactive intervention is the key. There's qualified advisors on there. It's there 365 days of the year, and there's a huge range of topics that the counsellors are experienced in, from debt, family matters, to substance abuse, to stress, to depression, to legal issues, and it allows employees the access to that. It's also a benefit for them. It improves productivity, morale, and it supports them. Remember, it's confidential as well. Now, I'd like to thank you for listening to me today. I try and give you an overview on here today, and I try and help you as much as possible. If I've affected you in any way and it's hit on a note or a nerve about something that's happening within the workplace at the moment, you can contact me, okay? The email address I put up on the screen is my email address, so it comes through to me. It doesn't go through to a team of people that have access to it. It's me, the person that spoke to you on the webinar. I have years of experience in dealing with all aspects of HR and employment law and health and safety. Even now, you know, strings to my bows to do with substance abuse, alcohol abuse, addiction and mental health issues. I don't mind answering any question for you, whether you're a client or not. If you are a client, I draw your attention to our advice line. We ensure you to use that. So amanda@peninsula-uk.com is my email address. If you want access to any previous webinars I've hosted, they could be to do with working time regulations, stress depression, contract changes, legislation changes, or really anything about any aspect of employment law, you can access my channel, which is www.youtube.com/PBS Press Office. Remember always to quote webinar 56 so I know what you're talking about, but take into effect the date today on this webinar and also the fact that I'm giving you an overview. It might not be applicable to your business when you're given an overview. It's, you know your business, I don't. I'm giving you an overview on law. Thank you very much for listening to me today. I hope to help you again soon, and it's goodbye from me.